One of the bigger games in week 10 of college football is Texas A&M against South Carolina. And coming into the season, I don't think anybody really thought that. Now, granted, South Carolina is not, one of those teams that is competing for an SEC championship, but they are still a much better team than most people anticipated. And Texas A&M, same way. They are a one-loss team that just beat LSU and potentially found their quarterback of the future. And they are playing with a lot of momentum. They are playing really well, and this is going to be a fun game to watch. When you look at both of these teams, there are questions that must be answered by both sides. But first, we're going to say this. If you like defensive line play, if you are a fan of defensive lines and what they can do, this is the game for you. There might not be a better game in college football besides this one. This is a game that features two elite defensive lines. Texas A&M has a star-studded group of defensive linemen. Nick Scorton, Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart. You have so many players on Texas A&M, but South Carolina is good too. Al Kennard has been really good. Dylan Stewart is an emerging freshman. Tonka Hemingway is a very underrated defensive tackle. So if you like defensive line play, this is definitely the game for you. That leads us into these questions, though. How does Texas A&M's offensive line handle South Carolina's dominating defensive line? This is a South Carolina defensive line that has made multiple offenses they faced this year look much worse than they actually are. They did it to Ole Miss, they did it to a number of teams, and they are going to be a tough group. Now, Texas A&M is going to want to run the football with Marcel Reed running the show. We saw that they are going to run the football more. And yes, he made some really nice throws, but he wants to run before he really wants to throw. But being said, you can't really underestimate his arm. LSU did that, and they had to worry about his legs, and that opened things up. So that's going to be fun to see how this Texas A&M offensive line, which I think played pretty well when he came into the game, you saw him do some really exciting things, and now you get to take a look at what he's capable of doing when he faces this defensive line. For South Carolina is how do you contain Marcel Reed? Some of that is going to be on the defensive line. Then you also have really good linebackers. That's kind of a slept on group because of how well the defensive line is playing. That's going to be a fun group to watch. South Carolina's defense against Marcel Reed is going to be the matchup to watch. How they contain Marcel Reed basically determines the game. If Reed has a big game like he did against LSU, then Texas A&M is going to win this football game. If they keep him in check, South Carolina is going to be in business for an upset here. And no offense to LSU's defense, but I think even losing Harold Perkins didn't magically fix their problems. I think we kind of saw that. They did not have an answer for Reed. They didn't have a way to slow him down, and that's going to make life very difficult if any team cannot do that. And it's a big reason why Texas A&M was able to win the game this past weekend, and that was really fun to watch. Reed is obviously the quarterback of this team, and he is QB1 until further notice. If he gets hurt or even if he has a terrible game, I don't necessarily know if you pull him just because of what he brings to the table. His ability to run, we'll talk about impact players here. Marshall Reed's ability to run opens up the game for Texas A&M, and a mobile quarterback opens things up for a lot of teams as well. If you have a mobile quarterback, you have so much access to an entire different set of playbook or plays in your playbook because your quarterback can run. And we saw what that did to LSU. They did not have an adjustment for Marcel Reed, and that was a big thing for this team. Now, the rushing attack was good even without Marcel Reed. Le'Veon Moss has been phenomenal this year, 757 yards and 10 touchdowns. Amari Daniels had some good runs against LSU. This rushing attack is still very good. Now you add a good runner at quarterback, you're in good hands if you are Texas A&M. The passing attack has been kind of all over the place in terms of who has been the guy. Noah Thomas has stepped up in a big way at times this year. I think that you saw Jade Walker made some big plays, although he had a targeting penalty that we'll probably discuss on this channel later this week. He's going to be out for the first half of this game. So he is someone that could be an impact, but we won't see him till the second half. We'll see what that means. Cyrus Allen and Jabari Barber were brought in from the transfer portal. They have been solid as well, but you don't have anybody that's been a certified alpha right now. Thomas has 22 catches. The next one is Barber with 18. Then you have Allen with 14 and Walker with 12. So it's not like one of them is way better than the other. It's just we've seen them kind of rotate who is good. You obviously need that to continue. The defense is what has been really fun to watch. under Mike Elko. And we saw that with him at Duke, and it's not a surprise that he's doing that here at Texas A&M. He just has more talent to work with. We already talked about the defensive line, Scorton, Turner, Stewart. That's just the trio that starts it all. That is a really good group. The linebackers, super underrated. Torian York has been a phenomenal competitor. Scooby Williams has been a good addition to this team ever since he got on campus. You also see guys like Ryan Kennedy has been really good. You look at what he is capable of doing. Uh, Kennedy has been really, really explosive at times, and that is a good depth piece to have. The secondary has benefited from that too. Now, granted, that is a good group, and one of the biggest questions I had with that group was who can step up opposite of Will Lee. Will Lee has been a great addition from Kansas State. He has been a really fun player to watch, but I had questions about who that other corner was going to be. I think we have that answer. DJ Mays had a phenomenal game against LSU. Two interceptions on the year. He was everywhere, and he has been really fun to watch. And they're going to need him to step up again and again as the year goes on. And granted, this is maybe not the toughest test in terms of passing attacks against South Carolina, but you're going to have your hands full. For the Gamecocks here, everything starts with Lenora Sellers. That is going to be the biggest impact player for this team. Now, this is a team that wants to run the football, and they are going to have their hands full. They are going to have to be physical, but also this is a team that we keep doubting on a weekly basis, and they keep surprising people. Yes, they're 4-3, but I think that's a better record than most people gave them credit for. Maybe even myself at the beginning of the year. I don't know if I necessarily knew that they were going to be at this point. And Sellers has shown some flashes of potential. We just want to see him maybe take the passing game to another level. We'll see what happens there. But he is a physical player, a just huge player to tackle. You pair him with Raheem Sanders, who's kind of had a revival of sorts of his career, and you have two very physical, very big running backs, or ball carriers, I should say, that are going to make life difficult for Texas A&M. They're going to be physical. They're going to just make sure that your durability is up to speed, and we'll see what happens there. The passing attack is going to have to step up, though. You look at what this team has done so far this year. Jose Bennett is the leading receiver with 270 yards and 3 touchdowns. Joshua Simon at tight end. It has the most receptions on this team, but nobody has over 300 yards receiving. That's because they don't really throw the ball with any sort of efficiency deep downfield, and they are going to try to complement the rushing attack as much as they can with the passing attack. That is going to dictate how well this team plays and how well they do against a Texas A&M team that is on fire right now. It's going to be tough, but the reason why you feel excited is because of this defensive line. We talked about these guys before. We didn't mention TJ Sanders. Kyle Kennard has been phenomenal. 12 and a half tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks. Dylan Stewart is learning on the fly. Had some times where it's been rough, but he's also had some really exciting performances. 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Tonka Hemingway having a really good year. His film has been really fun to watch there. The defensive backfield is going to benefit from that. But also the linebackers don't get enough credit either. Debo Williams, Bam Martin Scott, even the addition of Demetrius Knight. You saw some really exciting players for this group and what the potential they had for this year, and they have stepped up in a big way. Now, the secondary has been good as well. Part of that has to do with quarterbacks feeling the need to get the ball out earlier because of that defensive line, but they are still a good group. Uman Awari, EQ Smith, O'Donnell Fortune, Jalen Kilgore. You've seen guys pick off right there. That quad of groups is five. What is that? 6, 9 interceptions this year, and they'll have all the interceptions for this team. That has been a really good group, and yes, part of that has to do with the front seven, front six, whatever. Still, you have to be able to make those plays, and they are making them. One way that South Carolina stays in this game is if they can contain Marcel Reed and force him into some bad decisions. Turnovers will be huge. I cannot emphasize that enough for South Carolina. If they can find a way to turn over Texas A&M, they are going to be in this game. It's going to be a dogfight, which is exactly what South Carolina wants, and that is how they keep this game interesting. Texas A&M, like I said, though, playing with a ton of momentum, playing a ton of confidence, and that's really exciting for this team. It's going to be fun to see if Marcel Reed continues on this absolute tear of a run or if South Carolina is going to pull off the upset.